Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling a pretty big question.
Yeah.
Was FDR's New Deal really as progressive for all Americans? Or did some groups kind of get left behind?
Interesting question.
Yeah, we're going to zero in on the experiences of African Americans,
Okay.
Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans during this time. And we're using excerpts from this history podcast episode
Right.
called Roosevelt's New Deal and Civil Rights, 1933 to 1945.
Right.
Progress or limitations.
Interesting.
So get ready to unpack some historical twists and turns.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
Because it's about to get interesting.
It really is intriguing, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the surface, you have these massive programs
Right.
like the WPA and the CCC pumping money into the economy, employing millions for many Black Americans.
Okay.
These initiatives were lifelines during the Depression,
Oh, wow.
providing jobs and a sense of hope.
Okay, so tangible progress for sure.
Yeah.
But our sources also hint at a more complicated story.
Uh-oh.
What was happening behind the scenes?
Well, to get his New Deal legislation passed,
Right.
Roosevelt needed the support of Southern Democrats in Congress.
Okay.
And as you might guess, many weren't exactly known for their commitment to racial equality.
So Roosevelt's walking a political tightrope here.
Yeah.
How did that impact the lives of African Americans under the New Deal?
Well, it meant that while these programs provided relief,
Okay.
they often operated within the existing framework of segregation.
Oh, wow.
So think about it.
Okay.
Separate housing, unequal pay,
Oh,
limited opportunities for advance and progress, yes.
Right.
But at what cost?
that raises so many questions. Did this political maneuvering affect the implementation of these programs nationwide?
It absolutely did.
Right.
Take the Agricultural Adjustment Act, or
Wow.
AAA.
Right.
In theory, it was meant to help struggling farmers.
Right.
But in practice, it often benefited white landowners at the expense of Black sharecroppers,
Wow.
who were frequently excluded from its benefits and protections.
So even a program designed to help all farmers
Yeah.
ended up kind of exacerbating existing inequality.
Exactly.
Wow.
It underscores a key point.
Yeah.
You can't just look at the intent of a policy.
Okay.
You have to examine its actual impact.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting with the FEPC.
The Fair Employment Practices Committee.
Yes.
Remind me what that was all about.
It was created in 1941 in response to A. Philip Randolph's threatened March on Washington.
Okay.
Randolph, a powerful Black labor leader, demanded an end to discrimination in defense industries,
Okay.
which were booming because of the war.
So the FEPC was kind of a concession by Roosevelt to avoid potential unrest.
It was a strategic move, no doubt,
Yeah.
but it also marked a shift.
Right.
For the first time, the federal government formally acknowledged and acted
Yeah.
to address racial discrimination in hiring practices,
Okay.
particularly in industries vital to the war effort.
That's huge. But was it just a symbolic gesture, or did it lead to real change?
That's a question historians still debate.
Ah,
The FEPC was limited in scope and faced resistance from employers.
right.
It wasn't a cure-all,
Okay.
but it did set a precedent.
Oh,
Think of it as a stepping stone for later civil rights legislation.
fascinating. So while Roosevelt was navigating these political complexities, was he also open to hearing directly from Black communities?
That's where the Black cabinet comes in.
I've heard the term, but I'm a bit fuzzy on the details.
Okay.
Fill me in.
It was an informal group of Black advisors, intellectuals, and activists
Okay.
whom Roosevelt consulted on issues affecting the Black community.
So really influential people.
Oh, yeah. These weren't figureheads.
Okay.
We're talking about influential individuals like Mary McLeod Bethune,
Mm-hmm.
a renowned educator and founder of the National Council of Negro Women.
Wow.
She had FDR's ear and wasn't afraid to use it to advocate for change.
So even though Roosevelt couldn't openly challenge segregation due to political pressure, he was creating spaces for Black voices at the highest levels of government.
Yeah.
Was this Black cabinet truly influential, or was it more symbolic?
That's where historians diverge.
Okay.
Some see it as a genuine effort by Roosevelt to understand and address Black concerns.
Okay.
Others argue it was a way to appease Black voters
Right.
without making substantial policy changes.
Okay, so we're already seeing the New Deal's impact on African Americans as a mixed bag.
Yeah,
Progress, but also compromises and limitations.
definitely.
What about Hispanic Americans? Did they share a similar experience?
Unfortunately, the reality for Hispanic Americans, especially in the Southwest, was much harsher.
Oh, wow.
They encountered entrenched segregation and economic hardship that the New Deal largely failed to alleviate.
It's heartbreaking to imagine the level of poverty and discrimination they faced.
Yeah.
Our source material even quotes President Lyndon B. Johnson, who witnessed this firsthand.
Right.
While teaching Mexican-American children in Texas during the 1920s.
Wow.
He described their living conditions as utterly dire.
Oh, my gosh.
Saying they were buried half alive in illiteracy.
That's powerful.
That's a powerful image, and it highlights the systemic neglect they faced.
Yeah.
What's striking is that programs like the AAA, which were supposed to help farmers, often excluded Hispanic farm workers from labor protections and benefits.
Yeah, it's true.
So while some groups saw some progress, others were left behind. It's becoming clear that the New Deal's impact was far from uniform.
It certainly wasn't a one-size-fits-all solution. And to grasp the full scope of its complexities, we need to turn our attention to how Native Americans fared under Roosevelt's policies.
All right, let's dive into the Indian New Deal.
Okay.
What was its goal, and how did it differ from previous approaches to Native American policy?
Well, the driving force behind it was John Collier, the Commissioner of Indian Affairs. He wanted to overturn decades of damaging federal policies that aimed to assimilate Native Americans into mainstream American culture, often at the expense of their traditions and way of life.
So a complete 180 from previous approaches.
Precisely.
Wow.
The Indian Reorganization Act of 1934,
a
key part of the Indian New Deal, focused on promoting tribal self-governance, encouraging cultural preservation, and crucially ending the land fragmentation policies that had devastated Native communities under the Dawes Act.
It sounds like a significant step towards respecting Native American autonomy.
Yeah.
But was it all smooth sailing? Were there any unintended consequences?
That's where things get nuanced.
Okay.
While many Native groups welcomed these changes, some felt the Indian New Deal didn't go far enough in restoring true sovereignty.
Okay.
And even with the best intentions, its implementation was often flawed.
So once again, we see a mixed bag of progress and challenges.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how each group's experience adds another layer to the New Deal's legacy. From the African American experience to the struggles of Hispanic Americans and the complexities of the Indian New Deal.
Right.
It's clear that assessing the New Deal's impact on minorities requires careful consideration.
Definitely.
But how do historians make sense of it all? How do they reconcile these contrasting narratives?
That's what we'll explore next.
Okay.
There are different schools of thought among historians when it comes to evaluating Roosevelt's legacy on civil rights.
Okay, let's unpack these different perspectives.
Right.
What are some of the prevailing interpretations of Roosevelt's legacy?
Well, you have historians like Arthur Schlesinger Jr., who tend to emphasize Roosevelt's achievements and his genuine desire to uplift marginalized communities. They see the New Deal, while imperfect, as a foundation for later civil rights progress.
So they view it as a step in the right direction, even if it wasn't a giant leap for mankind.
Exactly. They argue that Roosevelt had to navigate incredibly complex political realities, and that even incremental progress was significant in the context of the time. But then you have revisionist historians, like Howard Zinn, who argue that Roosevelt could and should have done more to directly challenge systemic racism.
So they acknowledge the progress made, but believe Roosevelt could have been bolder.
Yeah.
What evidence do they point to?
They point to his political compromises on issues like segregation,
Okay.
arguing that he prioritized his legislative agenda
Right.
over the urgent need for racial justice.
Yeah.
They also highlight the fact that many New Deal programs reinforced existing inequalities,
Right.
as we saw with the AAA.
It's interesting how different historians can look at the same set of events.
Yeah.
And come to such different conclusions.
Yeah, it really is.
Are there any other perspectives we should consider?
Absolutely. You have the institutionalist historians like Richard Hofstadter, who focus on the constraints of the political system itself. They argue that Roosevelt was limited by the structure of government, especially the powerful Southern Democrats in Congress, who vehemently opposed any significant civil rights reforms.
So it's a question of how much agency Roosevelt actually had
Right.
within the political landscape of the time.
Precisely. The institutionalists urge us to consider the context, the power dynamics,
Yeah.
and the limitations Roosevelt faced.
Okay.
They argue that while he may have desired more sweeping reforms,
Yeah.
he had to operate within the realm of the possible.
And then there are the social historians.
Yeah.
What's their take on the New Deal?
Yes. Social historians are less focused on Roosevelt himself
Okay.
and more interested in the lived experiences of ordinary people.
Right.
They dig into primary sources like letters,
Okay.
diaries, and oral histories to paint a nuanced picture of how the New Deal played out on the ground.
That's a perspective I find particularly compelling.
Yeah.
It's one thing to talk about policy in the abstract, but it's something else entirely to understand how it impacted the daily lives of individuals and communities.
I agree. By centering the voices of those who lived through this period,
Right.
social historians reveal the complexities, contradictions, and often unintended consequences of the New Deal.
Okay.
They remind us that history isn't just about presidents and policies.
Right.
It's about people.
It sounds like each of these perspectives offers a valuable piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
It's not about choosing a right or wrong interpretation,
Right.
but rather understanding the complexities of the era
Exactly.
and recognizing that there's no single definitive answer.
It's true.
It's about embracing the multifaceted nature of history
Yeah.
and appreciating the different lenses through which we can view the past. It's about acknowledging the limitations of our knowledge
Right.
and being open to new evidence and interpretations.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've explored the different ways historians interpret Roosevelt's legacy.
Right.
But where does that leave us, the listeners?
Yeah.
What can we take away from this deep dive
Yeah.
that we can apply to our own lives, to our own understanding of the world around us?
I think one of the most important takeaways is the power of critical thinking.
Okay.
The New Deal. Like any historical event
Right.
can't be understood through a single lens.
Yeah.
It requires us to engage with different perspectives,
Right.
to weigh evidence,
Yeah.
and to draw our own conclusions
Yeah.
based on the information available.
It's about being curious, asking questions, and challenging assumptions.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that history is messy,
Yeah.
complex,
Uh-huh.
and often contradictory.
Absolutely.
And it's about understanding that our interpretations of the past are shaped by our own perspectives,
Right.
experiences, and biases.
Totally.
We need to be aware of those influences
Yeah.
and strive for objectivity even if we can never fully achieve it.
It's true.
That's a powerful reminder. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the New Deal,
Okay.
what's one final thought, one provocative question
Yeah.
that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I would ask them to consider this.
Okay.
How do the legacies of the New Deal continue to shape our lives today?
Oh, wow.
How do the choices made during that era reverberate through time,
Yeah.
influencing everything from our social safety net to our political discourse?
Wow, that's a big question.
It is.
How would you suggest our listeners begin to grapple with that?
Start by looking around.
Okay.
Consider the debates we're having today about the role of government,
Okay.
about economic inequality, about social welfare programs.
Right.
Many of these issues have roots in the New Deal era.
You're right. The New Deal fundamentally reshaped the relationship
Yeah.
between the federal government and its citizens, and that impact is still felt today.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
when you encounter these issues,
Yeah.
don't just look at the surface.
Okay.
Ask yourself, how do the legacies of the New Deal inform our current understanding of these challenges?
Right.
And what lessons can we learn from the past as we navigate the complexities of the present?
Those are questions we could spend hours discussing. But for now, I think it's time to start wrapping things up.
Yeah, I agree. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. It's incredible how much we can learn from digging into this one period in American history.
Yeah, and we've only just scratched the surface. There are countless stories, perspectives, and debates waiting to be explored. That's what makes history so fascinating. It's a never-ending journey of discovery.
So before we say goodbye, let's take a moment to recap the key takeaways from our deep dive into the New Deal and its impact on minority communities. What are the most important things you hope our listeners will remember?
First and foremost, I hope they remember that the New Deal wasn't a monolithic entity. Its effects varied widely depending on the specific group we're looking at. We saw that firsthand with the starkly different experiences of African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans. Right. For African Americans, it was a time of both opportunity and frustration. Programs like the WPA and CCC provided jobs and a sense of hope, but systemic discrimination persisted, And Roosevelt's political calculations often limited his ability to push for more radical change.
Exactly. And for Hispanic Americans, the New Deal was often a story of unmet needs. They faced deep-seated prejudice and economic hardship that many programs simply fail to address.
And then there's the Indian New Deal, a fascinating example of a well-intentioned effort that had both positive and negative consequences. It marked a shift towards respecting tribal self-governance and cultural preservation, but it also faced resistance and didn't fully address the systemic challenges faced by Native communities.
Precisely. It's a reminder that even with the best intentions, policies can have unintended consequences, and that's why it's so important to critically examine the impact of these programs, not just their stated goals.
We also can't forget the importance of considering multiple perspectives. We saw how different historians interpret Roosevelt's legacy, emphasizing different aspects of the New Deal and its impact.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that history isn't about finding a single definitive answer. It's about grappling with complexities, considering different viewpoints, and recognizing that our understanding of the past is constantly evolving.
So what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with today? What's that final nugget of wisdom you want to leave them with?
I would say this: never stop questioning, never stop exploring, and never stop learning. The past is full of fascinating stories and valuable lessons, but it's up to us to uncover them. And by engaging with history in a thoughtful and critical way, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, our world, and the challenges we face today.
Beautifully said. I think we've successfully navigated the twists and turns of the New Deal. It's been quite a journey.
It certainly has. From the soaring hopes of its inception to the inevitable compromises and limitations, it's a story that continues to captivate and challenge us.
And as we've seen, it's a story that's still unfolding its legacy, still being debated and reinterpreted. Who knows what new insights future historians will bring to the table?
That's the exciting thing about history. It's never truly finished. There's always more to discover, more to understand, and more to learn.
On that note, we want to thank you, our listener, for joining us on this deep dive into the New Deal. We hope you've come away with a richer understanding of this complex and pivotal era in American history.
And we encourage you to continue exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop seeking knowledge.
Because, as we've seen today, history is more than just dates and names. It's a tapestry of human experiences, triumphs, and struggles that continue to shape our world.
So go forth and be curious, be informed, and be engaged. The past has much to teach us if we're willing to listen.
And until next time, keep diving deep.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.